And he said he's never had it happen before. So I said maybe that's a good omen for the future for Donegal GA. So that was a good one. Obviously, the title of this panel is Man-Made, Masculinity, Media and Power. It's something that there's a lot of conversation happening about this at the moment in loads of different arenas. And we couldn't have a better host and better idea for the panel as well. It's Paraic O'Brien, Channel 4 foreign correspondent. And I was chatting to him beforehand, and it is nerve-wracking coming to MacGill and speaking at it, but it's definitely more nerve-wracking when you have family in the crowd. So I want you to give a huge round of applause for Paraic's family who are joining us here today, mother and son uncle. And please give a huge round of applause for Paraic O'Brien and the entire panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me okay? Yes. Marvellous. Thank you, Vince, for that. I am super excited about this session. I had the privilege last week to have telephone conversations with this amazing panel, and the conversations were really compelling and thoughtful and honest and at times funny, so I look forward to continuing that. Today, I'm a little nervous about this session as well. I'm not going to lie, and I think maybe some of the other panelists are too, because it's fraught, right? And the language can be difficult. We are kind of wandering into a potential minefield here, but here we go. So forgive us if some of the language may not be spot on, but let's create a safe space, as they say. One of the other reasons I guess I'm nervous about this is masculinity was not a core topic of conversation around the kitchen table in Ballinasloe circa 75 to 85. And one of the reasons why it wasn't was, I suppose, myself and my late father didn't feel that we needed to talk about it because we knew where we stood in Irish society. We knew where we stood on our sports fields, in our politics, in our communities, in our churches. But that changed, and thank God it did. And I'm saying that as a father of 4 daughters, I am delighted that it did change. But with that change comes uncertainty, and with that change, on the one hand, people see that change as a chance to change society in a progressive way that we would all embrace. But there's also a sliver of society that weaponize that uncertainty, that use fear and that use the fear of that society in flux to propagate a much more negative vision of society and a much more negative vision of masculinity. And that is what we're here to talk about today. I'm not one for sort of catastrophizing masculinity. With 4 daughters, I have a constant stream of teenage boys, unfortunately, in and out of my house. And by and large, although under a lot of pressure, they're good lads. So that's sort of where I'm coming at this from. But there's also a problem. So the first half of the conversation will be about looking at the problem, and the second half of the conversation, I hope, will be focused on solutions and what we can do as educators, journalists, politicians, society to address some of these issues that we're talking about. So, without further ado, let me introduce you to the panel. Kate McDonald is a journalist with RTE. She recently did a phenomenal piece of journalism for Primetime, looking at the harm that is caused young people online, the kind of journalism I wish I'd done myself. That is Kate. Eamon McGee is very well known, a monster in the back line once upon a time in Donegal, a formidable defender, an All-Ireland medal under his belt, and I think it's fair to say Eamon at one point was an angry young man and has spoke very compellingly about addiction and mental health. I'm a big fan. Ian Robertson, at the end, is a psychologist, and a psychologist that does that rare thing of bringing clinical excellence to translate clinical excellence into a way that can meaningfully and positively affect people's lives. I am not one for endorsing things, but do grab a copy of his book, How Confidence Works. It is remarkable. Ladies and gentlemen, our remarkable panel. So in true middle-aged Irishman fashion, I'm going to start by getting the only woman on the panel to do most of the work. Kate is going to help us define some of our terms. What are we actually talking about here? So I suppose, Kate, the first question to you is going to be, we use this expression, the manosphere, and we know that there are some big characters on the front line of that, propagating these sorts of ideas. But at a very basic level, define the manosphere for us. What is it?
Okay, thank you, Paraic, and thanks to MacGill for having me. And yeah, thanks for the really difficult question, because the manosphere is very difficult to define. By its very nature, it is a kind of loose, very messy kind of online ecosystem of male influencers, podcasts, forums, content creators. And on the surface, a lot of the content is completely fine. You know, it's self-help, it's motivation tips, fitness tips, and stuff like that. But very quickly, it can veer into darker areas that can often blame women, in a lot of cases, for when men fall behind in certain areas of society. It also pushes the idea of the alpha male very strongly. It kind of also pushes this a kind of negatively distorted idea of masculinity that equates vulnerability with weakness. It's been around for about a decade. It used to be kind of confined to a much more niche corner of the internet, but it has evolved and kind of exploded during the pandemic. And it's now across every mainstream social media platform. It's kind of packaged in every kind of format. It is very influencer driven. It's also very commercial. A lot of these kind of big influencers have something to sell, whether it's a course or a crypto scheme or something like that. But key to it all is, as I said, it's on every major social media platform, and those social media platforms push it via their recommender systems, via their algorithms. So even if you're a young boy and you're on social media and you're not looking for this content, it will most likely find you.
Kate, give us who are the big characters in this world?
So the kind of most the most famous and the kind of very well referenced key influencer in this is Andrew Tate, and he is facing rape and trafficking charges in Romania. He's very proud misogynist. You know, he says things like women are only interested in the kind of top 10% of men and only interested in rich men. He said things like married women should be or are the property of their husbands, that women who have been sexually assaulted should bear responsibility for that. So he's kind of a main player. His brother Tristan is also a pretty big player. There's different kind of podcasters and streamers like Sneeko. There's the Fresh and Fit podcast that's popular as well, and there's lots of other micro influencers. The thing that's interesting about Tate as well is that he's been banned from TikTok and Instagram for years. His accounts have, but the content hasn't been banned. So, you know, there'd be clips of him on a podcast or just whatever, general clips of him will be pushed by the social media algorithms, even though he himself has been banned from those platforms.
Because one of the things that I hadn't heard of Andrew Tate until the whole Romanian charges thing came to the table. And I remember sitting around, we had some of my daughter's friends over having dinner, and I was given the Tate story that day and had come back from work, and literally was the first day I'd heard about the man, and asked the table about Andrew Tate. And they sort of laughed at me. It was like, how did you not know about this guy before today, and they were a group of teenage boys. So it's a really interesting dislocate, isn't it, how the way we consume the media is so different. The media that I consume is so different from teenage boys. But just in terms of the audience, hands up if you've heard of Andrew Tate. Oh. Okay. Very informed MacGill audience there. And that's good to know. So we just in terms of, where the whole audience is at. Does Conor McGregor fall into that category?
You said that. Yeah, I guess and we'll talk about, I think, the research that I did with teachers later, but he came up time and time again as a role model that a lot of boys look up to and tie their own identity into a lot. So he came up as a very, very dominant role model for a lot of, and this is, we'll talk about it later, but it is a survey that I did of 1,200 teachers in Ireland, and him and Tate were the two top figures that came out of that as being someone who young boys look up to.
I see. So that's the phenomenon we're here to discuss. In terms of the real world harm that this is doing, can I come to you, Eamon? You're, I suppose, in more regular contact with this demographic of young men than anybody else on the panel through your coaching work. Are you seeing the negative impacts of this in terms of real-world interactions with young people? Is this something that's on your radar in the real world, shall we say?
So, in my experience now, listen, I came into a senior dressing room in 2000, and I'm moved into the coaching world now in this last 4 or 5 years. Now I'm dealing with, from 20 down. And I have to say now, I've seen the changes. I've seen the challenges that they have now. I've explicitly never seen the manosphere, or that word called out now. And what I would say is, and I think Kate touched on, you also touched on it, this is a small cohort now, because we've been talking, and society has talked. I think Plato actually mentioned about the next generation and the worries that they had for the next generation. This conversation has been ongoing, and I just wouldn't want to be standing up here and saying that this is a massive, massive problem. In my experience, anecdotally, I give the figure, 90% of young males will be far better than I ever was, and far better than the generation before them. But I can see that there is that allure to that 5% that might have found themselves lost. They might have found themselves looking and seeking, as many of us were. Like, being a young male and being a young person in today's world is extremely difficult. So you go to the path of least resistance. What is there? What attracts me? And something superficial like an Andrew Tate philosophy, a Conor McGregor philosophy, that's easy. That can latch onto that. And there's no work to dig into that. And they cannot. And I've seen the allure of it. Like, I give the story of, because in my experience, Conor McGregor is an absolute clown. Like, I don't see the attraction personally. But I've seen it, a training one night where there's a wee bit of fisticuffs got up now, and like, I was kind of standing back to see how it would go. And now, before it got out, I was going to come in if it got out of hand. But one of the young fellas, and I always remember, one of the young fellas directly quoted Conor McGregor in terms of unconsciously saying, "You'll do nothing." And I says, that's a Conor McGregor quote. Why is he quoting someone like that? And I just found it really, really interesting. There's something there that's attracting, as again, that small cohort of young males to that whole philosophy in terms of the manosphere, in terms of whatever word that we want to put on it. But there's definitely an attraction there.
Kate, can I put the that same question to you, based on the journalism that you did for that primetime piece, again, just in terms of real-world harm, and particularly how women teachers were experiencing that from some of these young men. Can you just give us a sense of what your work found?
Yeah, so we, again, to try and figure out or kind of investigate how some of these ideas that float around the manosphere might be having a real-world impact and an effect on classrooms and classroom behaviour and student dynamics and stuff like that, we put out a survey to 1,200 teachers in Ireland through the teaching unions. We put out the survey, we got 1,200 responses. And the results were really, really interesting and really did show that there is a kind of a real impact of what young boys are seeing online and what they're doing in the classroom. And so some of the kind of top line results were 87% of the teachers that responded to the survey said that the influence of the manosphere on students concerned them. 78% said that they're hearing more concerning discussions linked to manosphere content over the last 5 years. 2/3 of them had heard concerning behaviour or comments or behaviour directed at female students from male students, and half of the teachers who responded had been personally targeted or affected, and that's either through disrespectful language, but also in some cases sexual harassment, sexual intimidation, rape threats. So this is having a real life impact. And once we got the survey results, obviously I followed up with lots of more in-depth interviews with teachers. A lot of them said, all of them said, this is not an issue with all boys that I teach. A lot of boys, most boys, are brilliant, but there is a problem there. There is a problem with just the sheer amount of this content that they're being fed from such a young age, and it's the ideas from the manosphere and it's graphic porn that is all over social media. So it's this kind of circular effect that, they're kind of, a lot of the teachers are saying, like, how would they, like, they can't get out of this kind of cyclical thing where they're seeing graphic, violent porn, ideas that women should be dominated by men, and some of them do act out on that. And this was kind of backed up by the teaching unions, who were saying that what really concerns them is that small cohort, and it's not across the board. And I wouldn't want to make it seem like that. It is a cohort, but how do you reach that cohort? And I spoke to one male teacher who was saying he worked in a school in the south inner city of Dublin, and he was like, these kids they are so lost in so many ways, have huge complex questions that they need answers to, and they're in some cases in very vulnerable states, going on social media, as all young people do, and seeing these kind of answers, these very shallow answers for very, very complex issues.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I'm of a generation that makes a very clear distinction between my social media online life and the real world. But I suppose for a lot of these young people, they're not making that distinction because they're living so much of their lives online. They're the same. So when we talk about online harm, it's a real thing. I'm mixing up the format a little bit, so apologies. But just as a matter of interest, do we have any teachers in the audience that have come across this in the classroom? We do. I can see there's a teacher way at the back. Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry, yeah. Are we allowed to do the mic thing very quickly now or not? Yeah, sorry to put the microphone people on the... But just very quickly, let's get to sort of practically contextualise this. Would any of those teachers like to say anything about this or not?
I'm no longer a teacher.
Yeah.
But I was up until about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I remember, I don't know if there's an equivalent charity in Ireland, but there's a charity in the UK called...
Sorry, it's coming. I put him on the spot.
Sorry, I am on the spot. I was just saying I'm no longer a teacher, but I was up until about 7 years ago, and there was a charity in 2013 in the UK called UK Feminista. I don't know if there's an Irish equivalent, but their whole mantra as an organisation was to get into classrooms and try and get ahead of this. And I remember them saying in 2013 that this was coming, and that generation will now be in their 20s, and we didn't get ahead of it. So I suppose that's something that I often reflect on. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Was there any other teacher that wanted to quickly talk? Yeah. There's a lady just in front of me right here. Yeah.
I would certainly have experience.
Would you just bear with us for a second while we get the mic to you?
I certainly have experience of a minority of boys. I am in a mixed secondary school where the comments made by the boys to the girls and in public would be deemed to be extremely inappropriate, referring to girls with the C word out loud, or saying to a girl in front of the lads and all the rest of it, did you enjoy fingering her last night? Or, and I also know that it's happening in the primary school. I have a daughter who is teaching 9-year-olds, and she said the comments at lunchtime by the boys to some of the little girls would make the hair stand on your head. Yeah. Now, it is a minority, and it often comes from children where there's unguarded, supervision. Yeah. Younger boys who have older brothers or older friends, and they end up watching various things that are way above, shouldn't be watched at all. Yeah. So, yes, there is, and I think there's an ignorance on parents' part of how serious this is. Yeah. But it is a minority so far.
I think that how parents respond to this is something that I have to say I'm very anxious to hear about. So we will come to that. But I suppose, are we saying that, to a certain extent, we've always had this, right? But are these influencers, Tate, etc., making it into a movement? Is that the distinction? Can I put that to Kate? Sorry.
I think it's. We were kind of tried to make the distinction. Obviously, there's always been kind of. When we were doing the survey, there's always been things that teachers or parents might be concerned about their kids watching, whether it's violent graphic video games or music videos, things that are kind of age inappropriate. But what makes this whole, I guess you could call it a movement, different is that instead of you seeking it out or a boy seeking it out, it is seeking them out via algorithms. It's like they, in a lot of cases, just can't escape this kind of content. It's everywhere. So I think that is the distinction of what kind of makes this slightly different, this kind of online manosphere, is that it's kind of inescapable.
Exactly. And there's no one in the room to put the brakes on it, as would have happened sort of back in the day. Somebody to say, hang on. Ian, can I come to you next? The narrative around lots of the manosphere is one of sort of hyper-confidence and dominance, I suppose, really. What's the difference between that and the kind of confidence that you talk about?
Confidence is the belief that you can do something, and that if you do that thing, the outcome you want is more likely to happen. So confidence in sport, as Eamon will tell you, is just critical because it actually makes you perform better. But that's different from dominance. Dominance is a primitive human tendency that's prevalent everywhere and happens unconsciously. It happens tall people versus small people, older sisters versus younger sisters. It happens higher status people, lower status people. It's a natural tendency we have to grade ourselves in dominance hierarchies. And the more dominant you feel, the more confidence you have. And that's why people of high socioeconomic status tend to feel more confident than people of lower socioeconomic status. It's why tall people feel, on average, more confidence than short people, and it's why men, on average, feel more confidence than women. And that's a huge advantage for all of these groups. And so what we see in this, I think, in these awful figures that Kate was talking about and Eamon describing in a minority of people, is the exaggeration and the clinging to this tendency that's naturally occurring in the world of all human relations, is the hanging on to that as a way of appeasing some of these internal uncertainties and anxieties and feelings of being low down in the dominance hierarchy. You know, the narrative from the misogyny of the manosphere that women are taking over all the jobs and women are running the world, and that kind of narrative means that there's a reaction to that feeling of inferiority. The academic achievement, for instance, in schools of girls is much higher than boys. And in response to that, you have this wonderful prize for a minority of boys of this feeling of superiority by linking into this kind of devious narrative of male supremacy and male success. It's a kind of a fake drug-like kind of story that's told to them that they hang on to, and has this wonderful drug-like effect. It makes them feel more powerful, increases dopamine levels in their brain, that reduces anxiety. It's a mini antidepressant, lifts their mood, and it makes them feel connected with other people who share these views. So it is a movement, and it's the same. It's got similar dynamics to all movements say fascist movements, where the downtrodden feel empowered by a fascist leader who once promises them, to feel superiority over usually some other group. In this case, in the manosphere, is superiority over women.
It's also, I've watched quite a few of the videos by way of research for today. And what strikes me, like typically, just to give you a sense, if you haven't seen them, there'll be, Andrew Tate will be in a video with his top off and a cigar, and he'll be having a rant, and the camera will pan around, there'll be a pile of cash on the table, there'll be a selection of gold watches, it'll be in some, god-awful penthouse somewhere. But what always strikes me watching the videos is how kind of like boring it is.
Yeah.
Like in terms of, it just seems so one-dimensional. It seems like the worst kind of, television ad for anything you could ever imagine. It lacks heart, it lacks depth, it lacks nuance.
I actually thought it was a parody. The first video that I seen, I thought it was a parody account. And just to come in and something there, it's something that I have seen in my experience, that the objectifying woman, in terms of the photos and in terms of, because in my experience there's always been a dressing, as Donald Trump says, the dressing room talk, the locker room talk. There's always been that there level, but it's ratcheted it up so much now. And in terms of, a young lad could spend an evening with a woman, there's pictures there. And I'm just wondering, is there a validation there for them to go out and say, look, this is what I've done, get the group validation? Because in my experience, every young person, and suppose we all seek some type of validation. And as again goes back, that small cohort, they are finding that validation within this objectifying woman, within this hyper-confidence mode that they're in now.
Yeah, the worst thing about this, and it goes back to, Paraic, your idea of the movement, we're all guided by social norms. Human beings are capable of anything. And it depends on the norms that civilization and education and culture offer them. The awful thing about social media is through the algorithms they can create new norms, and therefore something that would be totally unacceptable or would be whispered in the changing room before is now can be said. And so that, as the teacher was saying about the words that can be said and the things that can be said in public, there would 10, 15, 20 years ago there would be a sense of shame. You'd be inhibited in saying these things. But because social media are changing the norms, people feel live free to do this, and in fact maybe even rewarded for doing it, as you said, Eamon.
That came up a lot in the survey, just the language that a lot of the time male students felt comfortable using, and like they'd have kind of, as you were saying, the Conor McGregor catchphrases or the Andrew Tate, that kind of language, they just parrot that back to teachers when, you know, like a huge thing that came through the survey was that male students find it very difficult to take direction from female teachers. And when the female teachers tried to pull them up on that, they'd get these kind of one-line answers that they've seen from an Andrew Tate video or from Conor McGregor or something like that. So like that constant seeing of that language or hearing that language does then filter back to the locker room or the classroom.
Kate, just on that, did you get a chance to ask the teachers like how they should respond to that in the classroom?
Yeah, we asked them whether they felt equipped to deal with these kind of conversations when they came up, and vast majority said no, they didn't. I think a lot of the teachers that I spoke to felt that between trying to get the curriculum out of the way and all the other things that they had to do, that like these conversations were so weighty and so complex that some of them didn't touch it, kind of for time constraints or whatever, and the ones that did were kind of like, this needs to be its own entire class, because, you know, I can't teach English and also have these conversations, but I think it's so important to have the conversations, so I do spend a lot of the class trying to deconstruct some of these ideas of identity with the students.
And I suppose that brings us back to the home ultimately, doesn't it? And the kinds of messages and parenting people do of their boys. And I just wonder whether anyone on the panel has anything to reflect on parenting boys in this world.
Well, I mean, most parents would discourage their children from smoking. Even parents who would maybe because it's been so prevalent as a public health message that smoking kills you and smoking's bad. There's less of a strong consensus about drinking alcohol, but at least for smoking it works. You know, most parents would not want their kids their boys to be smoking at age 12, 13, 14, 15. Except there'll be some groups, and these small minority groups will probably overlap quite a bit with the groups who would allow them to do what's actually far worse than smoking, which is consume the terrible porn, consume the misogyny. Oliver Sacks, the great neurologist, before he died, he described what was happening in social media as a neurological catastrophe. And we have seen since 2012 a drop in the attention span. We've seen a drop in academic attainment, having been climbing for 100 years. The IQ of human beings, we've seen a drop in cognitive function, a drop in attention, and a huge rise in anxiety and emotional problems, body discontentment in girls, which is related to this manosphere as well. And, of course, boys, given the culture of boys, will often express the internal feelings of anxiety rather than, they will externalize them rather than internalize them. And again, it'll be this fairly probably growing minority of boys who are doing this. So for families, it's about getting people really serious. The government's getting really serious about this as a major threat to our national well-being. Yeah.
Just as a dad and a coach, Eamon, the same to you.
Much the same as being a young male in this world is hard. Parenting is hard too, as many of you can attest to. And just in my experience, you know, every generation will have its problem. every generation, will have that. It's just that this algorithm, this whatever it is, there's that 5-10%, whatever it is, are gravitating towards that. And I find that, and this is my own opinion, as Joanna often says, you're not always right, but this is my opinion now, that there's a lack of resilience. Now, academically, they're better. Professionally, they're doing better. They have so many opportunities, this generation. But I find in my own experience now is that, this is from the dressing room, is that there's a resilience issue. There is resilience in how you deal with it. And that goes back to the point of, this superficial philosophy of an Andrew Tate, that they gravitate towards the easiest path, the one that requires the least digging in and finding out about yourself. This is easy. You can go with the flow with this here. And I think that's that resilience piece. Because I always remember, like when I came into the sports world, I could have a go at you. I could give out to you. I'd say, Park, effing ship up or ship out here. I say that to a young person now, and they take personal offence that they shy away from it. And instead of maybe pushing back on me and saying no, they take this thing that it's me out to get them, and that's an issue that I would have found within inside the house, inside like my kids, my young fella is 7 here now, and it's such. I think this whole thing, this growth has been exponential. We're barely learning to deal with this whole online world, and now we have responsibility for the next generation and how they should deal with it. So it's a challenge, but it's such a massive challenge. I just don't want that 5%, whatever it is, growing up to be a bigger number, and it's how we deal with it. Because I totally agree with what Ian says now, that it's become, we're no longer focused on, it's so internal fighting. We're no longer kind of fostering growth, and it's prohibiting, and this algorithm, or whatever way you want to call it, is actually prohibiting our progress.
But have we caved to this? I mean, like we're the grown-ups in the room. Why isn't there like a progressive manosphere movement? Like why is it all that shit? If you'll excuse my French.
And sorry for hogging the mic here, but and again, my opinion here, there was and there has been a progressive movement, but there was no authenticity to it. I found that there was very show kind of. There was you put up a tweet, you put up an Instagram post, I support this, or hashtag, and that was seen as contributing to someone, rather than going out and attending a march, rather than going out and doing something, physically doing something. And we've seen over the last few years, that the progressive moment, the progressive manosphere, there was nothing to it. Now again, that there's a genuine people there that have been progressive and want to push forward, but I found that the progressive one there was a soft centre to them.
Is that right? A lack of authenticity?
In my opinion, there's okay. and I think the whole, a perfect illustration of that was the war in Gaza, about these progressives and how they stood by and watched this and nearly allowed it, and yet they were hashtagging whatever in vogue movement was going and supporting that.
Interesting. Can we talk about, Kate, we've mentioned the algorithms quite a bit, and obviously that's a key piece of all of this. In terms of realistic societal responses to this, what do you think the tech, because I find as a parent, I'm really struggling, and we're quite strict with devices and stuff. I'm really struggling to parent in that space, and I feel like the whole sort of tech system is ranged against me as a parent. I'm just wondering, what do you think the tech companies should be doing, or what role should they be playing, particularly in this manosphere space?
They could be doing anything, which would be more than they're doing now. I think there are calls for, there's been a big conversation about whether social media should be banned and phones should be banned for under 16s. That debate is kind of growing steam. Obviously, there's a ban coming in Australia very soon. There's also calls for the algorithm itself to be turned off by default for under 18s, which would kind of turn social media back to what it was when I was growing up, which was basically you just saw your friends' posts and videos. So you're not being fed stuff that you're not seeking out. So those are kind of two, solutions that have been bandied about quite a lot. We'll see what happens in Australia, but it would be very difficult, I imagine, to ban a phone for a 16-year-old, like maybe kind of primary school, but I don't know how the ban would work in practice. The algorithm, turning that off might be a simpler solution in this generation that is just grown up online.
Let's do a little experiment. I mentioned, why isn't there a progressive manosphere? If the MacGill Summer, if this was the kind of working group to start that movement today in Glenties, where would we start in terms of, what constitutes the kind of contemporary good man?
Well, we need the equivalent role models in the progressive manosphere to those that we have in the malign manosphere. Whether it's Gary Lineker or people who are going to be proud bearers of the positives of some versions of manhood, of courage, of character, of respect. These are old-fashioned values, that kind of post-Second World War values, and we know that, for example, people who were brought up during the Depression, and this is American data, men and women who were brought up during the Depression ended up much more emotionally resilient because they had some the experience of adversity as they were growing up, whereas that became progressively less resilient as the generations went on. And that resilience, as you were saying, Eamon, has really gone. So we need role models who are going to be credible role models, who are not going to get sidelined into identity politics, and who are not going to be constrained about praising. I mean, it's quite difficult to talk about sex in sex these days without someone saying to you, criticizing your language, gender, sex, etc. So I don't want to get into that area, but we need proud men who are respectful of women, who are praising certain virtues. The trouble is, all of these virtues that they might praise are slow burn for the brain's reward network. They don't give the pile of watches, the pile of cash that you mentioned. They give this immediate hedonic hit to the brain's reward network, and it's a very similar mechanism to the action of drugs like cocaine. The other slow burn virtues of character, of respect, of personal growth, these are much less addictive, but much slower, less extreme effects on the brain's reward network. So they're not nearly as immediately rewarding. And that's why we need to work on this. We need major PR companies coming in, major marketing companies coming in, and then we need to hijack the algorithms. If we can't switch them off for the under 18s, we need to hijack the algorithms. And there is a website in the UK called The Female Lead. It's a global website, and that aims to try and get young girls to have positive role models and to hijack the algorithm, so they're getting, rather than getting Kardashian-type role models, they're getting successful women and women that are making progress in different areas. So
It's interesting. I've done a fair bit of journalism around the far right, in Europe and stuff. So I've met a lot of young men in the hard right and the far right, and there is an overlap there between these two worlds we're talking about. But I'm always struck by how the vulnerability that's there. Not always, but sometimes it is. And it feels to me like sometimes the Andrew Tates and et al. Are sort of weaponizing that vulnerability. That's just. Can I put the same points to you, Eamon, just in terms of, MacGill Summer School, this day, thus starts the progressive manosphere movement. How would you pitch in? What would your thoughts be on that?
I've kind of been asked this question a few times over the years, and people have kind of come up with the idea that maybe we should have better role models in elite sport. And again, my opinion, I don't believe we should be looking to any type of elite sport for the role model, because there's a certain selfishness, there's a certain, the correct word, cutthroatness, and I think, and again, this is a societal thing, we value the wrong things. So the boys that get to the top, we look to that, and they get to the top by using not the right tools. And I think what we should be teaching our young people is that the real leaders is, we're in Glenties here now, is you go down the pitch tonight and there'll be, men there taking a group out of their own time, investing their time into them young people. And that's the leaders that we should be promoting and getting out there, rather than the leaders that have people that have got to this hyper-competitive ladder, got to the top of this hyper-competitive ladder, is that I think that's a long, long way off until we reevaluate the whole society thing now, but I think that's what we should be promoting more, is as people that are leading from within the community and are kind of doing it for... So at the end of the day, I wanted to be the best for Donegal for my own reasons. And them people that are doing that for the community are doing it for the community. That's the people that we should be promoting there.
I've run away at the time. I can't. We're going to get quick Q&A. I'm going to get in trouble. I was so absorbed in this chat, I've forgotten. We'll come to Q&As in one moment. Just, Kate, I'm just conscious that, have you any reflections on that last thought about how to sort of...
Well, the role models thing is interesting, I think, as well, just from speaking to so many teachers, a lot of whom are female. Should there also be female role models for young boys to look up to? And should we try to push that idea? Because... if there's an issue with young boys having a lack of respect or showing a lack of respect for female teachers, should they be seeing other female role models elsewhere in their lives and using and having female role models? That should be part of a progressive manosphere, possibly.
Can I just quickly get, that's a point we sort of have ignored. We were sort of working on the assumption that we were talking about male role models for young men, but that's a very powerful point.
And of course, as a man, I'm focused on men, and it's a brilliant idea. And, Katie Taylor, you may not like boxing, but Katie Taylor would be an example of that. And yes, I think we need of both sexes, we need role models. And I just couldn't agree more with Eamon. The GAA is a fantastic potential vehicle for trying out ways of doing this, of expanding that sense of what it means to be a good man or a good woman, and very, very different from what we're seeing in the manosphere.
Thank you. Right, so we'll throw it open to you all. I never know how to decide who to pick. But I'll tell you what, I'm going to start right down the back, if that's all right. So there's a woman there, right? Yes. If you stand up, that's you. That's it. Yeah. If you wouldn't mind, just introduce yourself. If the question is to a particular panel member, just say that.
Okay, maybe you'll decide that. Teresa Barger, I'm a foreigner, and so this first question I dared to ask in this forum. I was struck, I looked it up, and the lopsidedness between female university graduates and male is pretty much the same as it is in many other countries, and it's a little bit more than the U.S., 56% women. And it seems to me that you haven't talked about sort of the root cause and whether this is true in Ireland or not, and if it is a root cause. But I know in the U.S. we are expecting more and more academic achievement from very young kids, age 5, 6, 7, when girls are much more developmentally advanced, and boys, or one theory is that boys become very discouraged at a young age and then give up. And so it's the achievement of boys at young age in school is much less than the girls, and then that continues. And also we see the pathologizing of boy behavior. So, if a boy is acting out or restless, going around the classroom, standing up, they put them on drugs. And so I was just wondering if you all and whoever is the best, and maybe the professor has a view on that. What do you have the same sort of root causes here, where boys really do feel that girls are having better achievement, and with the change toward more professional jobs, they're also doing better in the workplace? Are those things true?
I have a feeling that you might have quite a good answer to this. So can I just quickly ask you, like in terms of that educational achievement stuff, what do you see as the solution? That that you have some sort of two-tiered system so that boys start later or end later, or what do you think?
I go all around the world, and I always ask how lopsided are the university graduates. Qatar is 75% women, because all the men know they can get a job, where you have to work your butt off to get a job as a woman. But I'd be very interested in Finland, because as I understand it, they don't ask for educational achievement really start until they're age 7, and then they do very well by the time they get to grade whatever that is, grade 12. We get to grade 8, which would be age 14. And then age 18, they do really well. So I don't know if they've kept that up and whether they actually have a fairer and less lopsided educational system. But in the U.S., I would say, just from the things I've read, it would be those two things: earlier educational attainment, turning boys off, and not letting boys be boys.
Thank you very much for that. We'll take another. I'm going to stay again at the back. There's a gentleman standing up right there at the back. I will come forward as well, don't I?
Hi, everyone. David W. Higgins is my name, economist. I actually spoke on the panel this morning, so I hope they'll let me. They hope to keep the mic running. Thanks to the panel. I have a question about where a solution might come from. So on our panel earlier, I mentioned the fact that key life milestones, home ownership, marriage and family, have gone later in life. So it used to be the mid-20s, now it's very much the mid-30s. And I wonder, what if the clock was turned back? Now, marriage is not a perfect institution. There are marriages that have toxic males within them. But surely that a lot of the teenage, I think, misbehaviour that's arising out of this very dark manosphere is because there isn't a horizon for young men nowadays. It's very much kind of that the real partnering with a loving partner comes very much later in life. And surely if that was more on the horizon of teenagers heading into their 20s as opposed to far off into their 30s, that might be something that would create improvement.
Thank you. That's very interesting. It's this idea of sort of, the end of predictable progress, isn't it, that once upon a time there were these railway tracks for your employment, for your accommodation, and to a certain extent for your relationship, that those railway tracks, to a certain extent, have been ripped up for many of our young people. And I was thinking of the session earlier, particularly like when you think about, not to be the AI bore in the room, but like the way AI is going to change how people get into entry-level employment. It's a time of extreme flux for both young men and young women. Would anybody in the panel like to talk to that last point?
Yes, to join you as an AI board, I mean, that's going to change everything. And our education system is very language dominant. And so that question about boys being compared early with girls, adversely, if you like, because girls' language develops earlier and better than boys, and so they thrive better in the education system. And of course, among that minority of boys we've heard about are going to be many of them who have felt they're losing out and not performing. I'm sorry, I have nothing more sensible to say on this. I've lost the track of myself.
Go for it.
No, just on the root causes and kind of missing those milestones. I think we do know that, and education data in Ireland does say this as well, but a lot of researchers kind of focus on that US data that in terms of high school graduation, girls are outperforming boys. And we also know that male suicide rates are extremely high and that there is a mental health crisis affecting young men. And in Ireland, we live in a housing crisis. There is so much uncertainty for young people. They're also all addicted to their phones. There's so much uncertainty. There's so many questions. And that vulnerability is being preyed on by these influencers and this manosphere. So, yeah, the root problems are there. And because they're there are people making money off it.
Let's take some more questions. I'm going to stick to the back of the timing. There's a woman right down under the M in MacGill Summer School.
All right, hello. My name's Finola. I have 4 sons, 19 to 27. I also lecture in DKT in construction engineering, so I'm surrounded by young men all the time. I don't see what the teachers probably see in secondary school. I don't see it when they come into first year. I don't see any evidence of it. When they get to final year, they're terrific, mature young men. I think by the time they're the age coming into first and second year university, I think they realise the parts of Conor McGregor and Andrew Tate and Kristen Tate, they realise the shallowness of it. I think that they're not stupid. They've copped on to there's a shallowness of it. I also... The point you made about young women and their role models, I think that's so important. I think women rule the world. They absolutely rule the world. They just don't realise it. They don't realise it. Because I have an alpha male. I have 4 sons, very different. Alpha male, eldest. GAA, boxing, plumber. He's not unlike Conor McGregor in a lot of ways. I have the second one, good-looking, charming, influencer. Third one's a worker. The fourth one's terrific. So they're all very different. So what I'm trying to say...
That's next year's panel sorting.
But what I'm trying to say, when women rule the world, when my eldest alpha male met a strong woman, it took the edges off him. It made him a much better young man. It made him a much better young man. Women, young women particularly, rule the world, but they just need to be taught that. And know that when they're coming through school. They need to see that everywhere. Okay, that's... the next point I want to make is Conor McGregor and Andrew Tate. In some ways, I'm very thankful for Andrew Tate. I have to say I'm very thankful for him. I heard about him first, I suppose, the beginning of COVID. He was... I think we need to be aware of timing. Timing. Why did Andrew Tate come into prominence? Part of the reason was because he spoke out very, very loudly, very clearly on paedophilia and the Hollywood connection with paedophilia. He also he came out very, very strongly on the COVID vaccine and encouraged young men not to take it, so thank God for that, because my sons were awake before I was. Conor McGregor, I don't care, I'm going to say what I have to say and then have a think about it. Conor McGregor, I met him briefly. I found him mannerly. This is my personal. I'm going to say it. I don't care. Personally, I have met him briefly. I found him mannerly. If Conor McGregor is a rapist, and he may well be, the question is this. That got an awful lot of media focus as soon as he started talking about the stabbings in Dublin. It's timing. It's all about timing. Andrew Tate came to prominence because of his anti-vaccine stance and his paedophilia stance. Conor McGregor has really, the light has been shone on him, and it may well be rightly, but it also coincided at the time with his very strong anti-immigration stance. And that's all I'll say about that.
Thank you for that. This lady here in the front.
Would you agree that unpleasant as the manosphere is, the real problem is, or the ultimate problem is the connection with sexual violence? The Met Police and the National Commissioners of the UK did a study which in their own words was eye-watering. 1 in 10 women are victims of sexual abuse. 1 in 15 men are perpetrators of sexual abuse. Just try and imagine that in this room. That's a football team. So as you say, 90% of men are good men. Most boys start off innocent, but they may well get dragged into Conor McGregor world and be at risk of sexual abuse. That's basically the ultimate problem. And women are still shamed in silence. They don't talk about it. And too many good men are bystanders and don't really speak up about it. I completely disagree with the lady who just spoke, but that's another point. But would you agree with what I said?
I mean, thank you for bringing up that point, because like lots of the framing around the manosphere is the man as victim, but that actually is the reality of people's real lives, and sexual violence. Would any of you like to speak to that?
Just on the point, that the bystanders thing, and I think I've seen that in action. Now, it's maybe homophobic language, it's misogyny, and you just keep the head down. You don't want to rock the boat, and I think we've got to teach our young men and our young women that it's good to just be that leader, to stand, to walk out. It's the most uncomfortable place to be out there, rather than what the rest are they're talking. And I would love to have said that I've challenged lads in the dressing room and in my social groups when they've brought it up, knowing that it was wrong, be it racist language, whatever. I haven't been that leader, but that's definitely a big point, is that within their social groups we should be encouraging men to step forward more.
Okay, can I? Yeah, I suppose to the point, Kate, even though we're trying to analyse this phenomenon, like at its core, is it about sexual violence?
At its core, it's about male dominance over women, and I think that can take lots of forms. But as part of the research for our programme, we obviously spoke to a lot of sexual violence charities and women's aid and stuff like that, and they very much see the ideas that are pushed in the manosphere as part of this cycle of sexual violence, and say that we should stop saying, or we need to start linking it more, because that's where it starts. So I do think, that's a really good point.
So I think Bridget wanted to speak there, but I think that truth matters, and the problem about the social media and the manosphere is it feeds off lies. Lies like myths like 80% of women are attracted to 20% of men. Just plucked out the air nonsense. Lies like COVID vaccines are harmful and have killed more people than have saved. Lies and nonsense. People accept the science behind their phones. They use their phones, which is based in deep science. The COVID vaccine is based in deep science. Social research is based in deep science, but we defer to people purveying lies, and we don't have a commitment to truth, and we somehow have to realise that truth matters. And if we don't have that commitment to truth in the social media, and that's where accountability in the social media matters, then we're going to allow the social media and influencers and algorithm designers to push people into all sorts of worlds of unscientific lies that are going to distort their behaviour.
We have time for another couple of questions. I'm going to go with this woman here. But yeah, we'll have time for Bridget in a minute.
Thank you. Una Monaghan from lovely Leitrim. You're all jealous. I've 2 children, 22 and 21. Son is 22, and the thing that strikes me about him is, you know, he goes to the gym, he plays football with the lads, he goes for runs, he goes to work, and I'm thinking, God, this is great, he's fine. And that's head in the sand attitude. So my question is, where's parental responsibility in this? I want him to come to me. So he did come to me about Andrew Tate when he was about 18, because he was like, he could see this was wrong, and he was sort of saying, what's all this about, Mum? Now, of course, I was completely horrified. But I went to him recently and asked him, what's an incel? Because he nearly collapsed on the ground at the fact that I even knew what this was. But I just thought, we have to have this conversation. We have to open the conversation. So I think the best role models for these young men are their mothers. Their mothers are the ones that lead this out. And we're the ones, never mind your Katie Taylors of the world, we're the ordinary women of the country. And that's what you want to aspire to be, a decent human being that raises good boys. And that's what I would ask your comment on.
Great point. You know, coming from my perspective, the temptation is to put it all on the teachers. Once again, get it into the schools, and you know, there's a part to play in that. But I feel us as parents, we need to. A lot of this here is a failing in our behalf. You know, by giving them unlimited access to something as unregulated as Twitter, as the internet. And I think we as parents need to step up to it, and that's the reality. We need to face up to the fact that we've been failing and step up to it now.
Bridget.
I'm afraid to stand up at this stage. I wonder to what extent is this dark manosphere a reaction, a part of a broader reaction against what was historically a very short period of feminism. If we think of contemporary feminism, hit Ireland maybe in the early 70s, so it's not a long time. And women have struggled in many, many ways and continue. We heard about sexual violence. And yet it seems as if almost before the promise of feminism, which is very simply that men and women are treated equally, that before that was achieved, somehow or other the reaction has set in. And so I wonder to what extent is it part of a wider, you know, the way in which Trump is abolishing all EDI policies and whatever. So is it a part of the social media change in communication, but there's also maybe something wider in society? And then in terms of possibility to change, I think Ireland has one of the unique and distinctive institutions that could do so much in this sphere, and that's the GAA. And I know, Eamon, you said that we have to celebrate the coaches who bring all the young fellas out tonight, and absolutely. But the reason why there's so many young fellas going out tonight is they want to be you. They want to play for their county.
Don't put that in them now.
No, but they want to play for their county. And I've watched the GAA, I've watched what they've done on addiction, on gambling. It's really powerful. They've got really big names to go out there and talk about their experiences. And so if there could be a twinning between the GAA and whatever group, you could have every parish in Ireland, and it is a unique voluntary organisation. So I think it could really work if there was a programme which was all about how can we create a world in which masculinity is valued and valuable, but not at the expense of women.
Thank you. It is interesting, isn't it, how many of these manosphere men come out of the world of mixed martial arts. You know, it was described, I think John McCain described it as human cockfighting. And Conor McGregor, you know, was for a time the biggest cock of them all. But it's interesting that it's individualistic, it's materialistic, it's just you in the cage. It's got all the bells and whistles of the worst of sort of hyper-American advertising compared to the GAA, which is, you know, rooted in a very, very different spiritual place. So we've got time, I'd say, for 2 more questions. I'm going to go to, we had this lady here, that the teacher that we spoke to earlier, the mic is going to come to you.
Sorry.
Sorry, I think we can be a bit positive as well in relation to the fact that a lot of this has been going on. It's only new to all of us. We're all trying to navigate it. And I think the next 10 years will see a big change with regard to helping men navigate this whole masculinity thing. And I do think we need a not more help in scaffolding parents and how to navigate the internet and what have you. I mean, new terms to me in my lifetime are things like consent, coercive control. You have a lot of rooting out of misogyny in the Met Police or Dodi Al-Fayed or whoever he is and various film stars. We're gradually catching up on some of these people. And I think, plus also the new senior cert in post-primary education. There are going to be major modules on helping children navigate the internet in terms of fake information as well as misogyny and everything else. So I think we can be positive because we're more aware of the dangers and we're bringing in new legal frameworks and educational frameworks that will help us. So I am positive that things will improve, hopefully.
Thank you very much. That seems like, I'm sorry, that seems like the perfect place to wrap it up on a positive note. Can I first of all, I wanted to say an enormous thank you to all of you. As last year was my first MacGill year, and I find the audience interaction hugely informed, and so I really appreciate that. But also, just thanks to this fantastic panel, I thought that discussion was gold-plated. Grant, thanks very much. I'm off to Syria on Monday.